Wow, thank you. Thank you for starting us with that. Happy New Year, everyone, and welcome. And thank you for finding time to join us. Today, we have colleagues from Africa region through AFCAN, but as well as ANEC from Asia Pacific. And we are all going to hear from great panelists, listening and hearing in terms of their experiences when it comes to research, implementation, and also real life when it comes to the inclusion. So the topic today we'll be focusing at is delivering quality of inclusive early childhood care and development services in Africa and also in Asia. Thank you, everyone. And just to remind that the meeting is being convened jointly by Access to Quality and the Knowledge Generation and Dissemination in Working Groups. So thank you very much. My name is Josephine Frela. I'll be your convener today. And just to remind everybody, just few meeting protocols for us to follow up, including introducing yourself through the chat box, put your name and organization, maybe the place also you come from. But also just to remind everyone to mute themselves unless if you're speaking. And also just to ensure that the availability of bandwidth for everybody, please, if you can put off your camera, unless if you are speaking like myself now. So just to make sure that everyone is able to really have the access of the webinar. But also just to remind everyone that the webinar is being recorded so that we can share with our colleagues who are not able to attend from one reason or another. But we also have the French interpretation. So for those who would prefer the French speaking, please, if you can click the button, the globe button at the bottom there. And also, as we're listening to the presenters, if you have any question or comment, please just feel free to type, and then later on we'll be able to have a session in terms of discussion based on what has been shared by our great presenters today. So other than me taking more time, I would like for us to start kicking off, and we will start with the two people who will be able to open for us, and we'll be able to hear and get a welcoming remarks from Mr. Tenguela Ba, but also we would have the opening remarks from Mr. Hambani. So Mr. Tenguela Ba is the Director of Pre-Primary Education in the Ministry of National Education in Senegal, and also is the Chair of the AU-CESA IECD Access to Quality Services Working Group. So Mr. Tenguela Ba would give us the welcoming remarks, but also when he's done, if he can invite Mr. Hambani, and Mr. Hambani is he's Acting Director for Education, Science, Technology, and Innovation at the African Union Commission, and he's also involved in the implementation of the African Union strategies for education and research and innovation within the overall broader African Union agenda and global issues. So if I can first invite Mr. Tenguela first, please, and then once you're done with welcoming remarks, please pass over to Mr. Hambani. Thank you, and over to you. Can you? Have we dropped? Right. And Mr. Hambani?
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. I'm Kasley Olabode Stevens. Mr. Hambani is join us in 2 minutes. He's on another meeting.
Okay. I'm wondering if within, for that case, we should proceed. And then we will be able to welcome. So, is that all right?
Yes, we can proceed, and then we'll come back to the remarks.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so I think we should proceed, and then we'll be able to hear from them later as we're going towards the closing remarks. We'll be able to combine both of the statements. And as such, we will dive in straight into we've got 2 sessions which we're going to focus on today, and I think it's really exciting when it comes to the aspect of inclusion. Mainly today we'll be really focusing in looking at disability. And it's just a nice way of starting the year and focusing in these areas, which sometimes as implementers or researchers, we're really trying to find ways in terms of how do we really go about it. So we are going to be hearing experiences in terms of in terms of high level. So we'll have a real life experience from a parent. We'll be able to hear from researchers, and also when it comes to measurements, when it comes to disability. So for people who are going to help other speakers in terms of setting up the scene, first we'll hear from a parent with a child with a disability, Yukabeth Kemunto, from Little Rock IECD Center in Kenya, I believe in Nairobi, who will be able to talk about real life and really tell us the disability, the experience she's having with the child, but also here in terms of access of services, what exactly and how is she being supported when it comes to services which are available when it comes to the disabilities, but in terms of support she's receiving also in the communities. And then this will be followed up with a landscape analysis for children with disabilities. And this will be shared by Professor Alicia Samuels. She will be sharing the findings of the landscape analysis, which is coming from the secondary data. And from Dr. Alicia that the preparation and production of this production was led by Dr. Wadad Slemming, who she's not with us, but Dr. Alicia will be able to present that nicely. And the principal research and writing team of this report was also done by Dr. Wadad and Professor Alicia. Then we'll be followed up with the hearing from our colleagues from Asia, Dr. Viba, who will talk about a guide for monitoring child development in low resource settings. And these are sometimes challenges we face. Dr. Viba Krishnamath is a developmental pediatrician with 18 years of experience in working with children with disability and their families in India. She's trained in developmental pediatrics at Children's Hospital, Boston, and founded an Mid Child Development Center. And currently, she's also serves as an expert on early childhood development and disability for the Government of India, WHO, and UNICEF. And she also serves as on the editorial board of the Journal of Developmental Behavior Pediatrics since 2011. So I hope hearing from these three perspectives will be really helpful for us in terms of learning and hearing this different perspective. It will be at high level, it will be quite a short presentation, but I think it will still be very useful. So without further ado, I would like to welcome Yukabeth Kemunto, a parent, so we could hear her perspective, please. Kemunto, over.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yukabeth Nyaboke. I am married with 4 children. I live in Ayani, Kibera. My second born is Melody Mora, and she is 22 years old. She is currently in college, pursuing her diploma in IECD at Tika Technical Institute. Melody was born with cerebral palsy, and we got to know when she was 2 years old. From 2 years, we began going to therapy at Kenyatta National Hospital twice a week till she was 5 years old. At the time, there were no schools that would be willing to take in Melody. I know about Little Rock through some neighbors. She then schooled in Little Rock from 2005 to mid-2017. As she moved to Bagati Road Primary School and then translated to Joy Valley Special School in Bungoma, where she completed her high school education. My family full accepted Melody, but my husband's side have not to the extent to refusing to visit us. She was found out she has a disability. Even the community, there is some unspoken stigma as people still think it is communicable. My biggest challenge, I was carrying her as she continues to grow older and get heavier. We could walk from home to school, which was quite a distance. I would see people staring, even some telling me to put her down to walk. This was before Teacher Riri introducing me to Rehema House, a government facility, who then gave me a first wheelchair. Due to where to tier, we have received wheelchair from different organizations and individuals who brought for her. The government has also helped in some ways, but they can do a lot more if registered under PWD. They assist you to pay fees around 80% for the whole year for high school, and also have Inua Jamii, which is support to give 2,000 per month, but it is very inconstant. For those who have not fully accepted their special children and still hiding them in the house, please bring them out. There is more knowledge, information, and assistance that is being provided today. I would like to also encourage the government officials to do more for persons with disability and their caregivers. For example, for those who need wheelchairs like Melody, have them readily available, bring in automatic one, which would also give the person a sense of independence. She needs a computer to help her in her work. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's very helpful to hear, and just to give actually the big picture of what parent caregivers and the children themselves go through in a daily basis when it comes to disability. Thank you. And if there'll be questions or you have comments, please put them in the chat, and we will be able to discuss this later once everybody has finished their presentation. So I'll pass you over to Professor Alicia, please.
Josie, then Mr. Ba and Mr. Mashelani are back.
They're back. Okay. Can we please finish maybe the two presentations, and then after that we'll be able to invite them? Thank you.
Could they come in now, and then maybe then we have the presentations?
Okay, that is fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
So passing back to Mr. Ba, please, if you can speak, and then after that, if you can invite Mr. Hambani.
Mr. Ba, you can unmute and come in. All right, I think we can give an opportunity to Mr. Hambani as Mr. Ba is connecting. Mr. Hambani, yeah, he can come in. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, moderator. And I'm sorry for having been a little bit late and disrupting this important meeting that is already taken off. Once again, my name is Amban Masheleni. I'm the acting director for the Department of Education, Science, Technology and Innovation in the African Union Commission. And we are very much pleased to join you today during this period where the African Union is hosting the Heads of State Summit here in Addis Ababa. So we are very happy that this event is actually raising the salient points of inclusive early childhood care and development, and allowing us to have the opportunity to share experiences and also to look at what we could do better moving forward. So we are very much delighted that this meeting is taking place. Dr. Lynette and all colleagues who are behind moving this important aspect of our continent forward, we really thank you for organizing this important event. We all know that the African Union has an agenda, Agenda 2063. The African Union has a continental education for strategy, CESA 16 to 2025. We all know that we at the African Union, through these agendas, we want to ensure inclusive education in Africa. You are also aware that our strategy for education has 12 thematic objectives that we want to see the continent address in order for us to move into a more inclusive education, and also to develop the key foundation of education on the continent. We have one of the objectives on early child education development, in which we have created a cluster that is led by Dr. Lynette and team, Afghan, to ensure that the issues related to early child education are objectively addressed. And today, you are touching one of the most important issues, where we do not want to leave anyone behind for whatever reason. We want Africans to access a quality education, quality training, and for them to contribute to the knowledge, skills, and innovation and creativity that is required for Africa's development, the Africa we want. This is very important for us at the African Union Commission to pay special attention for those who are easily at the helm of marginalization, those who really require our attention in the area of education, health, food and nutrition, and to ensure that the future of these people is guaranteed by empowering them with education. When I was growing up, I grew up with very difficult questions in my mind. One time I was walking in the streets of our country, and I saw people who were disabled begging along the street. Some of them were blind people, some of them were deaf people, some of them had natural disabilities that they cannot walk, some with all that. The biggest question I was having as a child and going to school and experiencing all these development processes in my life, I was asking myself, how do we ensure that these people have the right to what we are having? Is it that I should pray to get them miraculously healed and realize their own life? I had all these questions in my life. But today, as I speak in front of you, one thing I realize is that yes, these people can be empowered, and they are a powerful sector of our community that deserves equally the rights that we are enjoying, and the opportunities for them to contribute to the development of our continent. And therefore, this meeting we are having today, and in particular its focus on inclusive education, answers many questions that are giving us sleepless nights on how we can address these challenges and ensure that all people with disadvantages, particularly the youth, the women, and even some adults, are really given the opportunities to live an adequate, productive, and useful life they deserve, like all of us. And we believe that if we start at early childhood care and development, it is the best way we can create a very robust foundation that will help us to empower and give capacity to these people to have an equal opportunity to be responsible citizens that can actually play a vital role in the development of the continent. So we are very happy, and please rest assured that the African Union Commission is totally behind this discussion today. And in a way, we want to stand ready to embrace the outcome, the lessons that we are learning in Africa and Asia Pacific regions, and to highlight how best we can formulate future policies and strategies, as well as innovations that can allow us to achieve the objectives of a transformative education on the continent. Today, as we speak, there's been a great movement to focus and support education. And I want to underline that the Commission is working hard to ensure that 2024 is designated as the year of education in Africa. That will give us the opportunity to continue to mobilize ourselves to realize the bigger objectives of an educated continent, a continent that is able to take care of its own people in an inclusive way. So please allow me at this moment to thank you once again, your commitment, to wish you the best in these discussions, and we do expect that the best will be the outcome of this meeting today, and it's the first point you have put yourself towards the realization of the year of education in 2024. So I thank you very much, Dr. Lynette, Afghan, and the colleagues who are here, all the institutions that are presented here, and all the participants from member states, from partner countries. We wish you all the best in this endeavor. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mbani. I think that's very humbling and really great to hear what AU is doing and all the effort we are trying to do, also showing that we are working towards the strategies and goals also being set by AU. So that's very encouraging, but also you've given us good kind of positive challenge as well in terms of how do we address the disability aspect. Thank you. Mr. Ba, is he around?
I think he has connection issues, so we can proceed.
Okay, so yes, we will be able to add in when he's back. Thank you. Just give me a shout, please, when he's there.
Sure.
So I would like to invite Professor Alicia, please, so she can take us through landscape analysis for children with disabilities. You're welcome.
Sure.
Yeah, there you are.
Okay, you can see my screen, I'm sure.
Yes, we can.
Okay. So thank you for the opportunity to present the findings of a report that we did, which was commissioned by the African Early Childhood Network, that, you know, in terms of their commitments to advance the childhood agenda across the continent, and also to look at the status and the characteristics of children with disabilities, and how to best to promote their inclusion within all aspects of development, early childhood policy systems, etc. So there is the report that goes with this presentation, and I'm not sure that people have received the report. I am presenting on behalf of the team that conducted this report. Dr. Vidad Slemming is the leader, project leader, and I was co-assisted her on the project. So I apologize if the presentation comes across a little bit like a weather report on CNN, which talks about the weather in Africa. What we aim to do is just to pick out aspects that have come out in the report, which we would then suggest that you go and look at further. So the background to this is that the report provides an overview of the regional and country commitment provisions to address the needs of children with disabilities and their families, with a particular focus on children younger than 6 years of age. And it's about to inform how to best promote inclusive early childhood development programs, policy systems, and societies in the African region. We use multiple sources of data in this, including existing statistical data, primary and secondary research findings, UN and government policy and program documents, as well as NGO reports of organizations working in countries across the region. And we aimed as a project team to review data from all 55 AU members. So we were tasked with by AFCAN to provide and look at statistics on children with disabilities in the region, looking at the statistics disaggregated by age, gender, and type of disability and country, and then also to map what were the policies and institutional barriers to caring for children with disabilities, including some of the provisions. In terms of definitions that we used to focus our searches, we used the term children with disabilities, and we concentrated our review, as I said, on children younger than 6 years of age. And we used the CRPD definition of disability, which defines persons with disabilities as those who have long-term physical, mental, intellectual, or sensory impairments, which interact with various barriers and may hinder their full participation. And we limited our searches to studies conducted, or not studies, to information that we gained between that were available between 2012 and 2024. And we ran our our desktop review from April to August in 2022. Then the second part of what we were tasked to do is to map the services, including health, nutrition, early learning, safety and security, and responsive caregiving. And this was done in the context of the nurturing care framework. And so it was quite a hectic task that we had to accomplish. And the report that goes with this presentation is about 100 pages long. So, we tried to get as much detail as possible. We also tried to include as many non-English sources as possible, and used, basic translation on those. But most of the information in this report is drawn from secondary data and publicly available information that we found on the internet. And then also we tried efforts within the AFCAN network, from our partners in the AFCAN network, to using relevant sources to find data from them as well. But some of the information, especially at the country or sub-regional level, may not be up to date, and we are very much, we put that out there, and so a lot of data might be missing as well. The other aspect that we tried to have a validation workshop as well in October last year. This was unfortunately not very well attended, but we tried to present our preliminary findings, and also to obtain any additional data that we could from sources within the African region. So we obtained data about the prevalence of children with disabilities, where they are, and how they are counted. We use data obtained from mixed and national consensus and household surveys, disability surveys, as well as standardized tools such as the UNICEF and the Washington Group's Disability Statistics Child Functioning module, as well as the Early Childhood Development Index, as well as other tools such as Ages and Stages questionnaire and the Malawi Development Assessment Tool. And if you look at the report on table 2.1 on page 19 in the report, it's more explicit in terms of which data was available in which particular countries. And from this heat map here, you can see that, we really only obtained really quite extensive data from those countries marked as green. And there are still quite a number of gaps across the African Union in terms of, disability statistics. So we looked at, using the data, we looked at the prevalence of childhood disability as well as children suspected of developmental delay using two different tools. In terms of prevalence of childhood disability across the African Union, we see some regional prevalence estimates of children with disabilities among children younger than 4 years of age was highest in West Africa, followed by East and Southern Africa. And we also see that the Central African Republic, Ghana, Chad, and Madagascar, these were the top 5 countries reporting the highest percentages of young children aged 2 to 4 with 1 or more functional disabilities. In terms of suspected developmental delay, West and Central Africa had the highest prevalence, again, of suspected delay in early childhood development indicator, which with country estimates ranging from 24.9% in Ghana to 67.3% in Chad. So you can see quite a variable incidence of developmental delay across the African Union. In terms of just the achievements, and I mean, that has to be counteracted with some of the gaps that we see as well. We do see, growing regional and global commitments are resulting in significant improvements in the availability of data, especially in terms of some of what you saw in terms of the green on the map. We have an increasing number of countries, including the ECDI and the child functioning module in their national surveys. And in this way, it enables inter-country and intra-country comparable data to be developed in the region and globally. But we do also see that those who have not systematically included these modules are either making progress towards including them. And so we're hoping that this will continue. And what we're also seeing is that the data is being disaggregated by sex and age, which is vitally important, especially, as I say, we don't see a lot of data in relation to children younger than 2 years of age. And I think that is an important gap that we highlighted here. But we still see that overall countries are not uniformly using standardized definitions or measuring instruments across the region. In fact, less than 50% of AU countries have included their CFM into one of their national survey instruments. And so really we have a dearth of information of children 0 to 6 with children with disabilities 0 to 6 years of age. And most of the data is children older than that, over 5, etc. In terms of constitutional, legal, policy, and financial provisions and barriers, all countries we see have commitments to the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. But despite most African states having ratified the CRC, as well as the CRPD, the Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, there's been variable progress in translating these into meaningful reforms for children with disabilities on the continent. And there are additional regional commitments that further compel countries to realize rights for children with disabilities and their families. Also, in terms of the African Charter on the Rights and Welfare of the Child, all member states have ratified this. Again, in the report, you will see exactly which countries have done so. The African Disability Protocol, however, is the regional legal framework on disability for African Union member states in terms of how to formulate disability policy and legislation to promote the rights of persons with disabilities. However, since its adoption in 2018, only 3 countries have ratified it, and only 9 countries have signed the protocol. And for this to become it needs to come into effect if 15 members of the AU signed and ratified. So this is an urgent decision that requires member states, to ratify this important policy on people with disabilities on the African continent. So we see, yes, that most countries have adopted the CRC and the CRPD and are making firm commitments to improve early childhood development. All countries had at least one or more policy or legislative commitment or strategic document that were included in this review and that were in place. 19 countries either had broad-based disability policy strategies, But however, these were there was a limited focus on children within these documents, which is of concern. Inclusive education policies of particular interest to this webinar were present in 17 of the African 55 African Union countries, which is of concern. We're seeing progress, but I think it's not enough. And we see variability in the translating of the CRC into real reforms and commitments for children on the continent. And so we see this in national laws as well, that we don't see these specifics and whether countries are fully compliant with the CRPD. For example, 40 countries do not have child protection services, specific policies or legislation. So really, there tends to be a gross under-resourcing and underfunding for the provision of children in reality, irrespective of constitutional and legal and policy commitments.
If you can start winding up, Dr. Alicia, please.
Will do. Then in terms of, the second part, as I said, was looking at the nurturing care framework for children. And this is, the World Health Assembly and UNICEF is responsible for the nurturing care framework, and country profiles are developed in terms of looking at children's realizing good health, adequate nutrition, responsive caregiving opportunities, and early learning, security and safety for children. However, it is not clear to what extent children with disabilities are included in the nurturing care framework. The framework itself has been criticized for its lack of focus or integration of children with disabilities into this. So what we did again, looking at this, we did find in various countries some achievements in health. However, we do find that many countries have limited their services to urban areas. Again, lots of variability across the continent. And even in a country like South Africa, which has the most advanced expression of healthcare, we still find that children with disabilities do still struggle to have lots of access in terms of accessing healthcare and health facilities and rehab and intervention services. In terms of nutrition is really integrated across a lot of the learning areas. We see that some countries, for example, that provide training tools on how to feed children with disabilities. Children with disabilities are at increased risk for nutrition insufficient or malnutrition. So really, and they don't really get focused on in some of these nurturing care programs that look at nutrition in terms of their specific needs, except for, as I say, a few of these that we found, for example, the Spoon Foundation, which is available in Kenya, Zambia, and Mauritius. We also see a gap in challenge in terms of school feeding programs, which don't target children with disability because children with disability are not in school. So school feeding programs are not maybe the best way to target nutrition for children with disabilities. With respect to early learning, NGOs tend to play a very important role in terms of early childhood care and in services on the African continent. However, we know that we lack a lot of robust and reliable data on early childhood care and education. We find also that gender is a significant issue with young girls in Africa, irrespective of disability. More than 75% of young girls do not have access to pre-primary education on the continent. So when you add disability into this mix, it's actually, and age as well, we can just at this stage, surmise what the situation is for children, especially girl children with disabilities. In terms of responsive care, children with disabilities require responsive caregiving from parents as well. However, this was one of the aspects where we saw some of the least integration of children with disability into responsive care programs, with really very few examples looking at, for example, mental health of caregivers of children with disabilities as well. And just a few examples that we could find based on, what our desktop review. So there's really a need for more robust regional evidence based on this issue, especially. Then in terms of safety and security, many children with disabilities are excluded from WASH programs, and so we don't see a lot of integration there. What we do see is that also 95 million children under 5 their births are not recorded and they don't have a birth certificate. And so them being able to access services is also hindered by this. As I said, I have a little time to go into this detail, but in summary, we find that there are achievements happening across the African Union. However, we still need a lot more work to be done. And I urge you to engage with the report. We tried as far as possible to make it very readable. And, if you have any questions, please direct it to either myself or Dr. Vidad Slewing as well. So thank you very much.
Professor Listen, my apologies, I had to rush you, but
No
for some
problem.
reason, I don't know where we lose time. Time suddenly is gone.
Sure.
So I'm going straight to Dr. Viba, but if anybody else has questions, please keep on typing in the chat and they'll be picked up. And Dr. Viba, if you could really try even to reduce, I know we had told everybody 8 minutes, but if you can even do less so we have time for questions, I think that I would really appreciate. So over to you, please.
Thank you so much. I will certainly try to be brief and wait for question and answers. Firstly, a big thank you to the African Early Childhood Network and to ARNIC for having me represent Asia and to share and to learn from all of you. I'm delighted to be here. I will just share my slides. Here we go. Are you able to see the slides?
Yes, we can see the slides.
Okay. I want to talk to you in the next few minutes about the importance of monitoring child development. And I'll explain in a minute what I mean by that. And I've said here beyond ECD promotion, because I think every one of us in this virtual room knows that early childhood is important, that the first 3 to 6 years are critical, and that we need to promote early childhood development. But what else? I think part of the issue is when we use a disability statistic, like, 15% of children in such and such country have a disability, people are shocked. I find that the layperson says, it can't be 15%. How could there be so many children? Well, I hope in the next slide to show you why that's the case, because ECD is actually a continuum. There's no magical boundary beyond which a child has a disability. On the left here, you have this child. Now, this little girl probably has malnutrition, maybe has anemia, maybe lives in a home that's affected by poverty, and maybe her parents don't have the time for responsive caregiving or don't have the knowledge related to it. I don't know. What I do know is that the healthcare provider that gives this child immunizations or provides nutrition probably does not know when to pick up when she is language delayed, as I know she will become most likely. On the other hand, we may have a little boy who probably has autism, who's also language delayed, who's probably has access to a pediatrician, but still may not get diagnosed until maybe the age of 4 or 5 or 6, by which time our window of opportunity has become narrow. So if we think about ECD as a continuum, as the child at risk, the child with delays, and the child with disability, that group of children becomes very, very large. And it becomes very important for the people who reach that child to know that child has not just delays, but risk factors that will lead to developmental delays. There's a quote here which says, if you can't measure it, you can't improve it. And I'd like to make that case for every child's development. If we offer panaceas or one size fits all for all children, we are not going to pick up early the children who do need support. More importantly, I think what's really interesting is in the video right in the beginning, we spoke about the importance of communities, families, schools, etc., in terms of how they support early childhood development. So if we have a mother who's depressed or a child whose nutrition is suffering, we are not going to be able to identify children at risk who then will become children with delays and disabilities. So in other words, we'd end up waiting for them to fail and become children with disabilities before we actually improve their development. The most logical answer for most people is, well, then let's screen these children, right? Let's find a screening tool at 9 months, 18 months, 30 months, and so on. But I think screening is not the answer, and I'll tell you why. Because if you screen children and segregate them into pass and fail, there are not enough children, there are not enough services that allow us to address all these children, and we will only end up stigmatizing children and not offering them services. The other reason is if you wait 6 months to 1 year before each screening test, a lot happens. We've just talked about the continuum of child development. A lot happens in the period in between, and we are not able to pick up children early. And screening doesn't lead to prevention. Most importantly, we leave out the broader environment of the child, which is responsible to in terms of supporting the child's development. So here comes the guide for monitoring child development. This is actually a tool that has been around for a very long time. It's been around for over 20 years, and most recently in a WHO study, which looked at internationally validated tools, came out as one of the top ones for monitoring child development. Most importantly, it reflects our understanding of the bioecological theory, which is that children don't develop in isolation, they develop in the context of families and communities. So we need to talk about those. It talks about risk factors, and it monitors and supports rather than screens. It is totally evidence-based. We did 5 years of research along with our partners in South Africa, Argentina, and Turkey to develop this tool in its international form. I would be delighted to share the papers if anybody is interested. So this is what it looks like. Screening is the green lines, which is a snapshot in time. What we are proposing is monitor the person who actually has access to the child, continuously monitors and supports the child's development along with the family, along with the community that's involved in the child's development. The basic principle of the GMCD is that it is a clinical, open-ended interview. It's not a checklist. It does not pass you or fail you. Instead, the critical part of the GMCD is developing a partnership between the care provider and the caregiver, the parent, the grandparent, whoever is there. And the partnership is key. And let me explain how this happens. This is a conversation which begins like this, where you say, I'd love to talk to you about Aisha. We always talk about her health, but today I want to talk about her development. And let me explain what I mean by development. Now, I don't know about your countries, but in my country, certainly, the word for growth and development is the same. So often when I say development, they're thinking growth, and they say, yes, yes, we get her height and weight measured regularly. But here you have to explain that we're talking about her learning, thinking, understanding, communication, relationship, how she uses her fingers and hands, legs and body, hearing and vision. And then here is question number 1, which is the only closed-ended questions. Do you have any concerns about your child's development in any of these areas? And here the parent answers yes or no, and we say, no, great, let's talk some more. Yes, of course, we're going to talk about what your concern is. Let's hear it. Thereafter, the questions all become open-ended. And let me explain what I mean. If you're asking about expressive language, you ask, tell me how Aisha is communicating with you. How does your child tell you when she wants something? So here you can see the question is a how question. The parent answers not in yes and no. It's not a question which says, does your child speak 2 words, yes or no, right? This is a conversation opener. It invites the parent to talk about their child's development with joy, with curiosity, and it builds a relationship between the care provider and the caregiver. So what I see over here is what I want to tell you about how this works is that in the form of the GMCD, the answers have been coded, and that's what we ended up standardizing across 4 countries. And the answers were remarkably similar across 4 countries. So your answers are coded, and at the end, when you code the answers, you get to know which areas the child is doing age appropriately and which areas she needs more support. Question number 3 on receptive language says, what does she understand from what you say? Again, an open-ended question, which invites the parent or the caregiver to talk more about their child's development. And in the end, so it goes on like this with every domain of development. There are 7 questions. Question number 8, 9, and 10 are my favorite because they identify risk factors. So for example, it says, what do you do to support Aisha's development? How do you play with her? How do you get her to communicate? And there are opportunities to recognize what the parent is doing well, to support them, to praise them, and to offer additional options for supporting child development. The question number 9 talks about risk factors like maternal depression, whether mothers are feeling overwhelmed or depressed. And lastly, it offers opportunities for them to talk about how they are addressing their child's development in the face of their challenges. The amazing thing is we have used it with community health workers in several countries. And what we find is that all you need is a primary education to be able to administer this tool. In our country, our organization has worked with several community health workers who only have education up to the level of grade 8 or grade 7 sometimes, and they are literate, but that's all they need. They need to be in touch with the community, and that's the only thing that's important. I also want to show you this slide where it shows you the support cards, the support booklet, which goes along with the tool. So for example, if you find that a child in the age group of 9 to 11 months has an expressive language, which is closer to a 6-month-old, you have a little notation at the bottom which says, go to page 4. And this page 4 is what the community health worker is discussing with the parent. It's very easy to implement. It engages communities. We find communities get excited. Caregivers get excited. Community health workers get excited about using this tool. We've used it all over the world in over 35 to 40 countries, including several African countries like Rwanda and South Africa. Lastly, I want to say a big thank you for this opportunity from our entire research team who's there in the slide. But most importantly, want to invite all of you to the 5th International Developmental Pediatric Association Congress, which will be held in Johannesburg in 2023 between November 28th and December 1st. We will be doing a pre-conference workshop for the training of this tool. I want to clarify that the tool is free of cost once you have trained in it. So, and we would love to provide training to anybody who is interested. Thank you.
Wow, great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Viba. Right. So I think we've had, this is done in terms of setting the scene, and it's really been more than setting the scene. Quite a lot of interesting information we've heard from Mama Melody and coming to Professor Alicia, but also Dr. Vidba in terms of what is actually being done in terms of obviously the life experience, but research, but tool, which is really family centered. And it's got quite a lot, and it's actually been tested in a number of countries. So I expect that we have questions. We don't have, probably can give like 2-3 minutes so we can move to the next session. So I'll pass over to Grace here, but also if there are still more questions, I would encourage all speakers to really continue responding to them in the chat and even follow up later. Gracie, over to you so we can hear maybe like 2 or 3 questions, at least for each speaker.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Good evening, good morning, wherever you are. There's a lot of vibrant communication, especially in the chat box about country experiences and specific experiences. So please, let's keep sharing there. There's a question in the Q&A section directed to Professor Samuels, and I will read it. It's by one Mr. Abdul Malik Muwanga. He says, thank you for the research findings. You did mention about capacity building and mapping system actors. Did you involve ECD leaders at all levels, ECD centers, to get equipped with ECD inclusive leadership skills? What informed you finding on the suspected developmental delays? Did you interrogate the area of executive functioning, inhibitory control, and social emotional well-being for holistic development of children? If not, could we consider this as a research gap? That's to Professor Samuels.
Okay, so how we basically could ascertain this information was from looking at documents that we were obtained that were freely available on the internet or that we could access via the Afghan network. So it really is very difficult to access really detailed information in that way, because it's a lot of times that information is not available in that way. So just in terms of the detail that that you are looking for, that wasn't available to us in terms of that question. So yes, we are hampered by the quality of the data that is out there. The data might be somewhere, okay, but it's maybe in paper format, etc., but it wasn't available to us. And that's why we put out that proviso at the beginning that says, we are limited to what we found that we could obtain via our sources that we obtained. And we tried a range of sources. We looked at academic papers that were published as well. So luckily there is a more of scientific evidence also becoming available, but as I said, quite limited information out there.
Wonderful, thank you. I hope that has answered the question. There's another question here directed to Dr. Vibha. Was care from Oscar Kadenge, was care for child development referenced or used in developing this GMCD tool? And just to add on to that, one Mr. Jimmy Ivans asked, how does one get training for this? How does one register for training?
Thank you so much for both those questions. So Care for Child Development actually is a precursor to this. So as you know, Care for Child Development offers developmental support all children between the ages of 0 to 3. And oftentimes what we do is that we use the GMCD layered on top of the Care for Child Development. So the GMCD training can last from between 1 day for pediatricians to 6 days, which we use for community health workers because they have time constraints and can only do 4 to 5 hours a day. And there's plenty of practical hands-on practice as well. And we will be doing the next training, the live training in Johannesburg in November 28th to December 1st, when the conference is there for International Developmental Pediatric Association. So everyone is warmly invited to attend. I will share with the organizers the details of the conference. We also, if organizations specifically reach out to us, and I will share my email, we also offer online training for some people. And we also do, depending, for example, we have a team in Johannesburg, Dr. Mpele, who was part of our research team, has a team who will do training in Africa. So she would be, I'm sure, very happy to have you reach out to her for further training. So I will certainly share all the contact details so you can avail of it if you're interested.
Thank you. Is there any other question or comment? Otherwise, if Mr. Ba is here, I would welcome him for 1-2 minute statement.
Oui, bien sûr, je suis là. Voilà, bonjour, bonjour. Bonjour. Voilà, je m'excuse parce que j'avais un petit problème de connexion. Je suis à l'intérieur du pays dans le cadre d'une mission donc, du ministère de l'Éducation nationale qui m'a conduit donc, à l'intérieur du pays. Donc, par endroit, j'ai perdu la connexion, veuillez m'en excuser. Et cela prouve aussi à suffisance que nous avons un grand défi à relever, le problème de la connexion en Afrique. Mais je voudrais donc vous remercier et dire bonjour à tout le monde et vraiment me réjouir de cette, disons, de l'organisation donc de ce panel qui est très, très important. Et donc, vraiment, c'est l'occasion aussi de féliciter. J'ai suivi quelques éléments de présentation et je vous en félicite. Et c'est un panel important donc, dont le thème consiste à fournir des services inclusifs de soins et de développement de la petite enfance de qualité dans les régions d'Afrique et d'Asie-Pacifique. Donc, c'est un thème important et je crois que tout ce qui a été donc présenté ici donc, revêt un caractère essentiel pour nous en Afrique, en tout cas de grands défis et qui recoupe parfaitement donc l'ODD 4, la cible 4.2 des objectifs de développement, donc la cible 4.2, dont il a beaucoup été question à la conférence mondiale sur la petite enfance à Tashkent, où j'ai pris part en tant que représentant du Sénégal. Il y avait beaucoup de pays qui étaient l'Afrique était bien représentés, ainsi que l'Asie, parce que la cible 4.2, c'est de faire en sorte que toutes les filles et tous les garçons aient accès à des services, des activités de développement et de soins de la petite enfance et à une éducation préscolaire de qualité qui les prépare à suivre un enseignement primaire. Et l'Afrique, de ce point de vue, a de grands défis à relever parce que cette cible est loin d'être atteinte. Et je crois qu'il en a été beaucoup question à Tashkent, en Ouzbékistan. En tout cas, vraiment, c'est quelques mots que je voudrais peut-être dire et prononcer, en tout cas m'excusant d'avoir peut-être raté le début du problème à cause d'une connexion qui était partie parce que j'étais en voiture et c'était en cours de route. Et terminer aussi par, disons, vous souhaitez aussi une excellente année, bonne et heureuse année aussi à tout le monde. Et en tout cas, que toutes nos actions et que tous nos vœux, en tout cas, puissent revêtir un caractère de succès et simplement aussi pour le bonheur de nos enfants, la réussite de nos enfants, parce qu'en dernier ressort, c'est ça qui nous motive. Donc, la qualité des enseignements, apprentissages, la qualité des soins en Afrique, donc des défis à relever. Allez, merci beaucoup, merci donc à tout le monde.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tenguela Ba, the Director for Pre-Primary Education in the Ministry of National Education, Senegal, and also who is the chair of the IECD Access to Quality Services Working Group. Thank you for your words, and just encouraging to hear what also is being done in Senegal. So we are moving to the second session, the panel discussion. Apologies, we've kind of chewed a bit of time, but hopefully the next moderator will be able to manage that. Our apologies. So I'm going to hand over to Dolores Ware Naswa, who is a social worker and currently the executive director of Uganda Society for Disabled Children. And she has over 20 years of practice in disability development to work with children and young people with disabilities in Uganda. She's an active advocate for the advancement of inclusive policies in Uganda, which she believes is the long-term solution to persons with disabilities well-being. But also she's a part of the leadership team for the Equity and Inclusion Religion Education Learning Initiative Rally cluster in Uganda. Also, Dolores is a chair in terms of disability subcommittee of the AU-ECED cluster Access to Quality Working Group. So I'm handing over back to you, Dolores, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Zefin. Not sure with the video it's on. Yes, so okay, we are. Okay, yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning, good evening. Thank you very much for that introduction. Thank you also for the previous session. It has really given us a good head start into this next session. So I'm going to be moderating the panel discussion, and my role will be really to ensure that we hear from these very able presenters. They are a good team of researchers and also practitioners that have had quite some time in the topic that we're discussing today. So I would like now to take the honor to introduce them. And after that, I'll pass on some questions to them. I'll be asking them, I'll first give one round of questions, and if we have time, I hope we shall have time, because we've lost some, then we will also have a session for a plenary where we will be interacting more with the audience. So our first panelist is Daphne. And Daphne is an early childhood development specialist working at UNICEF Uganda, where she's been since May 2021. She has played a critical role in providing technical support in the planning, implementation, monitoring, and delivery of results for the Uganda Country Office Early Childhood Program. She has also served as an Early Childhood Development Officer at UNICEF Marara. She has developed development programming experience of over 18 years with international organizations, including the UNDP and also the United States Embassy in Uganda. She also has a Master's of Science in Early Childhood Development and a diploma in early childhood programs. So welcome, Daphne. We'll be speaking more about the interventions for disability in early childhood when she responds to the questions that I'll pose to her. Our next panelist is Dr. Angwenyi. I hope I pronounced that well. And Dr. Angwenyi is a postdoctoral researcher at the Institute for Human Development of Aga Khan University. She graduated with a bachelor's degree in sociology, a master's in public health, and also has a doctorate degree in global health. She's a project coordinator for the multi-country research SPAC, supporting African communities to increase the resilience and mental health of kids with developmental disorder and their caregivers. We'll be responding to questions posed to her, but drawing from the supporting African communities to increase the resilience and mental health of kids with developmental disorders and their caregivers in Aga Khan University, where she's had a lot of work. Our third panelist is Lina Njoroge Mutua. Lina is an inclusion teacher with a mission and passion to ignite fires that all children can learn. She has nearly 2 decades of experience serving as a special needs learning specialist. She's an English teacher, as a literacy coordinator and head of year at an international school in Nairobi. Lina holds a Bachelor of Education degree and certification in education. Her strong background in learning disability is from teaching in an exclusive special education school. So Lina will be responding to our questions, mostly drawing from her expert understanding learning differences. So, like I said, I'll be posing questions to you. And we're ready to go now. So the first question goes to Daphne. So Daphne, how are you balancing the assessment and identification side, the provision of early child development services on the other hand, and children across all tiers that are encouraged to enroll in early childhood development services? We're interested to know, to what extent are these early childhood development services ready to take on children with disabilities and those who may already be on intervention programs? For example, the teachers in mainstream services, are they trained to handle children with disabilities? Is the infrastructure and equipment provision in the early childhood development centers conducive for children with disabilities? Over to you. Over to you. I hope you've heard me.
Yes, I've heard you loud and clear. I hope you can hear me too.
Yes, everyone is hearing it.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Dolores, for your question. And I bring greetings from where I am in Uganda. It's a public holiday today, but we thought that it would be we could not miss such an opportunity to be part of this panel. The IDEC project, Dolores, I think your question begs me to give the audience a little bit of background about the IDEC project, the interventions for disabilities in early childhood. It's mainly a health-focused intervention that's trying to look at, coming from the background of where we have so many children, especially those children 0 to 3, no data on how many children with disabilities that we have in this age group. And yet we know that early interventions can help mitigate. It's really an open window of opportunity. So this project is mainly focused on children this age, 0 to 3. and we are piloting it in 5 districts in the country. I won't get into the details of that. And you know, mainly with this project, we focused on trying to just get data. So we focus in these 5 districts to be able to assess all the children within this district based on the MDATA, Malawi Development Assessment Tool, and be able to give them screening at the community level. So what we've done is train community health workers to be able to screen these children. If there's red flags, they're referred to the health facility, well, they are further assessed, and then those with severe disabilities are referred. The project has been going on for about 3 years, and we've had a lot of learning from this pilot project. How are we balancing the assessment and the identification? So we're doing this, you know, at the 3 levels that I've just mentioned. We first have the screening at the community level, and then we refer them to the health facility, and those with severe disabilities are referred. But the main focus of the 3 years that we've been doing this project so far is mainly on the caregiver skills training. And so we are able to work with the community health workers and the caregivers at home to be able to support these children. I mean, the MDAT tool is assessing, you know, a range of development across the cognitive, the physical, language, and social development. And we are using the Care for Child Development tool to support the caregivers at home and the caregivers, community health workers who are supporting the children. And so when you say IECD services, Dolores, I'm not sure whether you're referring to directly and teachers to school, because the age group we're focused on is mainly 0 to 3. And so we don't have preschool for them. We do range, because we were doing community interventions, we did not say children above 3, we do not test you. We're actually testing children even up to 7, 8, or 10 years. But what we're mainly doing with those is just ensuring that they have access to school and the gaps. So I can't tell you that we have the country have a lot of gaps in trained service providers. We even have gaps in access. Children are not being admitted into these schools and being given the support they're needing. What we're doing so far is support, advocacy. It's a interministerial initiative, and we're working together led by the Ministry of Health, working together with the Ministry of Education and the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development. So those are areas that I would identify right now as we have gaps in trying to get to that level that we want to get. But right now we are focusing on this level of saying, let's identify them, let's support these children, and be able to see that their effects are mitigated to the extent that we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You are identifying and referring. Actually, the childhood development services, of course, unless you unpack them, they remain, I would say, like mysterious. But yeah, it involves both the health and education, according to my own interpretation. And yeah, I think what is important from what you've mentioned is that you actually set out to address children 0 to 3 years, but you find that there are children that are above that age. And so you end up also having to work with them. So, and that's what happens a lot with the children with disabilities. Okay, so we will then, thank you for that bit, move to the second panelist, Dr. Ngwenyi. I would like you to respond to this. During the study, what was the level of participation of the male caregivers in your caregivers skills training? And you can as well take on, can you elaborate on the context specific toolkit to raise community awareness to improve identification of children with developmental disabilities in the community to reduce stigma? What could have been the key features of this toolkit? Dr. Ngwenyi, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Madam Ware, and I'm humbled and pleased to be joining this call. And I'm here on behalf of our larger project team. Allow me to give you a bit of context that will help feed into the questions that were just posed there. So SPARK, which is supporting African communities to build resilience and mental health for children with developmental disorders, as well as their caregivers. We started off this work as part of a pilot work that we did, the World Health Organization launched a caregiver skills training program in around there, 2016. And so Kenya was part of the countries that was participating to collect field trial data among other 30 countries on how this caregiver skills training program can be implemented. So it focuses on 9 group sessions and 3 home visits, and it targets children who are 2 to 9 years with a range of developmental disorders, but mainly focusing on behavioral and communication challenges. So when we did the pilot, we were focused our work in Kilifi and in Nairobi and Korogosho. And during our engagement, we had 2 components where we were trying to build translate and contextualize the intervention, but also try to see how much this intervention works. So when we're doing the intervention, by design, the caregiver skills training program requires that the primary caregiver participates in this program where they go through this course, their total, this coaching, modeling on how they're able to deal with their children. But during our work, we only had a very small representation of fathers, especially in the caregiver skills training. We didn't manage to get fathers. I think we only had 1 out of the 100 who were participating. Now, the evidence back then, it showed us that the caregiver skills training program is acceptable and can work. Now, in our current phase, where we are trying to scale up this intervention and working together with our colleagues in Ethiopia through the funding of the National Institute for Human Health Research, we want to do 2 things. So we want to develop, we want to identify these children early. We talk about 2 to 9-year-olds, but from the evidence we've gotten so far, these children are identified late when they've developed severe or other comorbidities, and maybe at the time when they're joining school. So what we want to do in the first phase in terms of early identification and working together with health, education, and social service sector stakeholders, as well as private sector stakeholders, we are trying to develop a tool that a community health volunteer or a lay teacher can use it in the community. And what consists in this tool of ours are sort of like stories, a combination tool where we have stories, we have images depicting subtle symptoms of developmental disorders that any caregiver or with a child who has this kind of behavioral or communication challenges is able to identify with that. Then through the training with our caregivers, with our community health volunteers or our support workers, they go through this training so that they're able to administer this tool, but more importantly is to raise awareness about developmental disorders, the importance of engaging in early engagement in care and help seeking. So also in this early phase of our study, we are trying to develop a resource kit that has been informed by consultations with actors within this setting. For example, where can you advise a caregiver to go for medical, for educational, for social services? So alongside the toolkit, we also have a resource kit that we are trying to develop so that you're able to raise awareness of the services that are locally available, but also where they can be referred for care. And then once you identify those who are eligible for the children who have developmental disorders, then delays, then they will be able to join in or be enrolled in the now caregiver skills training program, where we are trying to get more evidence to the extent to which this intervention works for children with developmental disorders. Back to you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Hangwenyi. Okay, I think you've explained to us a lot about your work. I just would like to encourage the audience as well to raise questions, and these questions can be coming on the chat box, and they will be responded to at some point. Just to see that we benefit from all that we can this time. I think we'll move on to the next panelist first before we can come back again. So our panelist was dealing with understanding learning differences in the classroom. The question is, how can we help educators, students, learning differences particularly in circumstances where the teacher has to deal with a large number of children in class. In this context, how realistic is it to effect an individualized educational plan? Over to you, Lina. Hi. Oh, Lina, unmute yourself, please. I think you're speaking, but you're not muted. Oh. Can you unmute, please? Lina? We can't hear her. She's talking, but I can't hear you. At least I can't hear you. Zayden, perhaps.
Is Zayden there?
Okay.
Yes, I am here. I don't know, perhaps you can try and use a different device. Maybe as she's trying to reconnect, we can continue.
Okay, yeah, we can speak a bit about the Dr. Angwenyi's submission. They are looking at 2 years to 9 years olds. The tools are being developed and they can be used by everyone. She submitted that the men in our families are actually not participating. I don't know. An earlier presenter mentioned that you would need not just to screen, not just to identify, but to move the entire family and community to do something about this. That's such that the continuous monitoring involves. And the men, they actually decide what happens to a child, any child, and most especially a child with disability. Would you like to say something more to that? What do you think, Dr. Vivian? If
Yes,
Lina, you already, just go ahead. I think Lina is already here.
Yeah, thank you so much for raising that. And I think you've really put it so well. It's a challenge and they are very important stakeholders to bring on board as decision makers in part of these interventions or activities that we are doing. While we recognize during our pilot work, we're not able to get them actively participate, or rather by design of the CST, more of the female caregivers ended up participating in the group sessions. There's a second component of the caregiver skills training that I want to talk about, where we talk about the home visits. So there's a schedule of 3 home visits, and we are aware our male caregivers, in most cases, maybe they're out working or they have night jobs or they're casuals. So during the home activity or the home visit, it's basically to ensure that the whole family is integrated within this engagement. So I'll give an example of one home visit where a caregiver, after learning whatever they have to learn through the group sessions, they're supposed to implement through home assignments. So during the home assignments, they're supposed to engage their child in the new skills or techniques that they've been taught. But within the home setting, you can involve the older or younger children, as well as the male caregivers. So allowing the intervention to have both the group session and the home visit component, it also allows to bring in the males within this intervention and to be active participants in this intervention. As we move on to the second phase of our study, one thing that we also noticed that as much as they are not, perhaps it's more of our engagement approach. So we need to think about how do we engage males? Do we engage them? Where can we find them? Which networks do we use to get them? And working through that can help us a lot in reaching out to them and also finding ways that are more flexible to be able to be more inclusive of these caregivers while implementing our intervention. Thank you. Back to you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Ian. We have you, Lina, now. Are you able to unmute? Hello? Not yet. Linda, not yet. I don't know whether there's anything in the chat I haven't seen. Okay. I'd ask another question to Daphne, such that we don't lose time. Daphne, you had a very good a study, the IDEC, and you very well elaborated on how it's helping and how you are using it, and you've also actually replicated it from colleagues in Malawi, which is very encouraging for such a discussion, for people to know that actually they can share good practice and they can take it away from here and use it in their own work. So my second question is, the project has cascaded training model that involves master trainers, district trainers. How long was the training of national level master trainers and that of the district trainers, and training for district health workers, teachers, and village health teams? Because this question relates to the fact that your training covers several things. You are dealing with caregivers, you are dealing with the early motor development support. So do you think the duration of training that you give is quite in-depth? Does it give the necessary and required knowledge and skills for them to really perform? How are these front workers supervised and supported to provide effective and quality support to families and children? Over to you, Daphne.
Thank you very much, Dolores. I'm sorry, for some reason my network was breaking. I didn't hear your first question. I can take the second question and then route back to you, so that if that's okay, or would you like to?
Okay, I can just say it. Okay, yeah, you sure. Cascaded a training model that involves master trainers, district trainers. There are several categories of people that you're training. So it's about how long the training was of the national level masters. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I actually had that, but then I thought it was the second question and that I had missed something earlier. Okay. Thank you very much, Dolores. I think what we've been doing with these trainings at the different levels is we're not taking training as one event that you're trained and you're gone. At all the three levels, we are having a series of training that take at least 2 weeks at a time. Yeah? So it is training with in the formal like classroom session, and then you also have a practical side of that training for 1 week and in the classroom, and another week we are having the practical side at all the three levels. And so, and this training isn't done once in the year, we are having it on a quarterly basis in some cases. Now that we're in the third year of the program, that we've reduced the number of times we're training, because especially at the master and district levels, we're taking these as the master trainers, and they are doing more of the support to the district and the frontline workers. When you're asking about how the monitoring support is done for the frontline workers, this program has engaged the district health team at a very from the very high level, the DHO and all these teams at the sub-districts. And so these frontline workers are supervised by the health facilities. They have a monthly meeting where they come every month to report on what they've been doing over the weeks, and also troubleshoot and get support from the health workers at the health facility, who will also guide them where they're having challenges. The health workers at the facility are supported by the district health team. The district health team is supported by the Ministry of Health team, where the master trainers are. Yes, I hope that answers the question. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to explain that it's cascaded. Yeah, and you have it all, well planned, because I think it was kind of a mixed team. But maybe, if you actually tailor that training and realize that community-based rehabilitation does bring all these groups together, it's possible. But, excuse me. Oh, sorry.
Hello, can you hear me now?
Oh. Yes, we can hear you, Lina. Great.
Okay. So you can ask me the questions again.
Sorry, Dolores, are you all right?
Yeah. I don't know what happened there. So I remember your questions about how can educators, how can you help educators? It comes down to what the first speaker had mentioned about government funding and how many teachers you can have. They are, I mean, up to the age of 3, the children have to go to school. But besides all the parents may know that the child and may know what needs to be done, but teachers, not all teachers are trained in actually educating the children and keeping them in the way that they can know. So what help do they need? They need training. That it comes down to training on how to teach the child to learn how to learn.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just have somewhat. I think it's better now. Thank you very much, Lina. I think your questions need some more because you missed out on the first round. The other question, you've answered it very well. And the use of the individual education plan in context of how realistic it is. Yeah.
So
but
for
second
children,
question.
Is that for me? So for children,
yes,
can you hear me?
Okay, go ahead.
So with children with learning disabilities, as you said, yeah, we want them all to learn, but they won't go on the same pace. They won't go at the same pace like all the other children. And the only way to monitor the progress is if they have the individualized plan. It's not a very big thing. It's just setting a target and agreeing it with the child and agreeing it with the teacher and agreeing it with the caregivers. And then after a period of time, you measure and see if they reach that where they are. Mainstream schools have large numbers, I understand that. But if we do not have a plan for each child, then we're just teaching them en masse. And that's why there has to be at least some sort of targets that are set, which are reviewed, and that's how you measure their progress.
Okay, yeah. So all the learners that you work with, definitely in school, you never have the severely disabled ones who don't come to school. I think that's just so that we know that there may be all sorts of learners. I think I'm asking this because sometimes there are children with severe disabilities and they cannot cross the distance to school. And how does that individualized education plan actually reach out to them? It will be very interesting to know.
So in my experience in a special ed school alone, they also had to have, like, it could be something as small as starting to make the sound, and for non-verbal students, it could be a target that would be social. So the target is the educational plan is not just for the academics, it could be overall for many different things. So in both settings, whether it's in mainstream where they're included or is where they're segregated in just an inclusion school, that also has to happen. Yeah, so it depends on what we are aiming for the child to do step by step by step. And that way, then it becomes measurable. Otherwise, you just have them in school as a place to just have them. And a lot of the time, as we heard from the parents, they are really criticized, they're ostracized, and they don't fit in. But when the teacher is aware of that, there's a way that you teach them in, depending on what it is that you're looking for the child. If they can't do the times table, maybe if they're learning the 2 times table when they are in year 1 or 2, you find different alternative ways of teaching that child that. But some of them is the social skills, like children with autism is probably just being in the space and coping with other children. But I do understand that not all children can be included, but I believe they should be included as much as possible because they can't live like an island in the world.
Okay. Okay. I think it responds to what somebody mentioned earlier, that you see, it's not just about you've identified, but that the community has to do a lot more. And we need to, I think in Africa, and I think in every continent, we need to be finding those alternatives and also measuring that they actually then become productive members of our societies and community. Okay, we still have some time. I don't know whether the questions are this time, but I think we still reserve that for the plenary session later. I still have some questions for the panelists for the benefit of the audience before they can actually come. So the next one will go to we have this one, has very many. I think it's Daphne. So some of the examples of community-based support for children with developmental disability that you would address, that you would tell us about, that address the urgent needs of families, because I think it's a challenge. Yeah, it's a challenge that your study, I think, brings out, that you would like to recommend for the future. Yeah, what are some of examples of community-based support for such children with developmental disabilities? Yeah.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much, Dolores. I think that's an excellent question, because I think the community is at the heart of everything that we do. The child lives in this community, the child thrives in this community, or can actually become worse depending on how the community treats them. So we've done a lot of social and behavior change-based interventions just to raise awareness. Mama Melody earlier talked about the stigma that she still faces from her family when she had a child with disability. We've seen so many examples of this in the communities that we are working in. But through engaging, so one thing is the acceptance that I think is very important, that it's really important to get the community to accept and love these people, because once they do that, then the children are able to are given, I think, a better step to be able to thrive. The second thing is also raising the awareness and skills of the community to be able to support these children. And we're doing that with the caregiver skills training, that we have seen interest, even not just from the mothers of the children with disabilities. And again, we also have an issue like what Dr. Vivian has, getting the fathers involved is another uphill climb. But we are having more mothers who come and they're interested in how to support the children. One thing that we see is really more of a gap is also the children who are above 3 or 2 plus up to primary school age. And even some of those in primary school age who are not able to access school. And so that is one of those gaps that we see. And we have designed, and we are talking about having play groups or community-based play groups to be able to support these children's learning. We have not yet gone to that level. We are talking about that in the scaling up pilot, in the coming years, and are looking for funding to be able to implement that. But I think that will also go a long way to support the early learning and development of the children where there's a big gap. And we've seen communities are willing to learn, willing to engage once they're given the tools, once they're given the knowledge, the information, and the support to be able to do this. So, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So it means that you work with support groups, actually. You do work with support groups already, or is it something that you are moving on to next?
No, it is more something that we are moving on to. What we have is within each communities, more the caregivers visiting, the frontline workers visiting homes. Right now, what we want to be able to do is bring those homes together and have some support groups and play groups based on this.
Yeah. I think that's it's a very good next step, because I think what we kind of suffer, I think, is keeping, say, learning only at school. I think when we keep thinking of school, that our children are going to be educated, and then we look at our children with disabilities that cannot actually make it there, we think they have failed. And so that kind of mindset continues to disrupt us. But we also need to definitely think about other actors in the community and able to bring them to that same level of appreciation. Yeah, so it's in the right direction. Okay, Dr. Angweni, I have a question for you. Then I'll go to Lina again. The question is, what are the lessons learned in terms of possibilities for scale-up? Can this model be integrated in a national system for greater reach for families and also for sustainability?
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Were. So we are actually starting the phase 2 of the study that I was talking about. And one of the key questions that we want to learn is more of contextualization and how we implement it and scalability. So as we are doing all this work, we are very aware that there are some questions we need to answer. For example, how are we engaging the health system, the education, the social service sector as actors and partners in this work? As we aim to identify these children early, can this community identification tool that we are trying to pilot and use, can it be scaled up? Can a community health volunteer, when we leave this work, be able to continue using it in the community? When you talk about the CST intervention, we know most of these interventions are require specialists, but in the community, in the caregiver skills training, we are trying to work with non-specialists. And in different contexts, for example, in Kenya, we are working with people with a different background, for example, teachers, special needs education teachers. We're working with people with a nursing background. And in Ethiopia, they're trying to work with teachers who are based in the community. Once they're trained and we build that capacity, can they continue providing this intervention? And also looking at where this setting of the intervention is delivered. Can it be done in the community? Can we integrate it within the facility settings where we have the waiting areas, and we can use that opportunity to be able to train and deliver this intervention? So those are some of the questions we are trying to answer, and hopefully as we go along and implement this project, which is between now and 2025, we'll be able to get some data both on the detection tool, but also on the interventions implementability. Back to you.
Okay, great. So the health system, the education systems, the families are galvanized. Perhaps the question would be, what does it take to turn the entire community around? Who should be acting more? Is it the parents? Is it who should be? Perhaps, who do you need to be targeting more? I know you probably have raised awareness, or you haven't. Just talk to that, please.
I think it's a whole society approach. And I think one thing that we are very cognizant in our methodology and as we work, we have to do it on a participatory level. We are engaging caregivers, both male, female. We are engaging the health sector in terms of the community of volunteers identifying, but we also need to train the healthcare workers at the facility level to be able to diagnose and refer to the appropriate care. When we talk about inclusive education spaces, we are working together with the education, we call them EACs, the Education Assessment Resource Centers, and also the different schools that are able to absorb children with different learning needs, so that as we are implementing our work, we're able also to refer people to where they can get the appropriate support and care. But more importantly, involving government in all our engagement, that is all the line ministries that are involved in this work. We are proactively engaging them either directly or as part of our advisory boards, so that our evidence informs what is already going on, but also we keep learning from existing evidence and also practices that are already ongoing. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, much. Thank you very much, sir. Okay. I think you are, you take it step by step, because otherwise you leave some behind, and that's exactly what you don't want to do if you are doing any such social movement. You haven't told us maybe a lot about the challenges. We can get that later. But I'm sure the negative attitudes, which if not put into perspective, can still make one step forward and 2 steps backwards. Just citing the very one of the male involvement, because they are the key to what I think our communities will change towards. Okay, Nina, back to you. Yeah, as a teacher, using IEPs, you have raised capacities, you have yourself even begun some of this work, initiated some of this work in some of your communities. And you know what happens at the mainstream schools, and you know that actually communities have to be doing more. So elaborate on the role of the extended family more, beyond the parent who receives your care. Give us skills training. I think you would nail this better for us in supporting a child living with disabilities beyond the parent.
So it takes, as we've had, it takes many different people to be able to have a positive impact on these children. So beyond teachers, beyond the parent, the communities just need centers. It's about knowledge, acceptance, because there's a lot of denial about their disability and their ability to work. So it's about knowledge training, and making everyone around know how to handle the children and what they cannot do, what they're capable, and just actually showing that they can live a full life depending to what their capacity is like. Does that answer the question?
Yeah. In a situation, for example, it does answer. It's the knowledge and whom you're transferring to. Supposing my child can never be literate. I know you are a literature teacher.
Yeah. Yes.
Supposing I have a child who cannot learn to read and write. Yeah. I have to work. I live in a settlement like Kibera. Yeah. In Kenya.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to. How would you help my child who might only learn to perhaps lay bricks and equate that learning, to another learner, so that they can also earn a living when they grow up? It's I think dealing with such difficult questions that they can only perhaps to lay bricks. They probably can't even make them. But yet you have a curriculum that you are passing on all the time.
Yeah. So to lay the bricks, they probably are good at it by seeing. So it comes down to the strength of the child. What is it that they can do really well, which can also be, then the curriculum is adjusted to that, towards that. For example, and the government comes in really handy in this, where the governments have supported children with disabilities, they make better strength. There's vocational schools, that's why they exist. That's why we need our polytechnics. That's why we needed those. So when funding is put in those schools, then a lot more is gained. So for instance, if a child can only lay bricks, as you've said, they should be able to attend school from when they're little. They may not be able to read, but they can listen to oral reading. So that's what we do. If there's a book, some books have audio versions of it. Yes, so when you say they come from Kibera, it means then the government should, because these are people living below a certain poverty scale. So they should be funding to help those children and bursaries for them to go. In some countries, they have schools specifically for these children. and they go and they learn. Let's say if you're good at baking, you are attached to someone who can do that, and eventually you earn a living because that is encouraged. And that's a problem that I see that that we face, and that's why I feel there should be a lot more given to children with disabilities, because when you don't teach them or show them how to lay the bricks, but we cannot have houses without the bricks, then that's a problem. So they may not learn to write, they may learn not to read, but there are other alternatives. And this is why there's so many other alternatives to make people feel this children valuable. But we cannot be done by an individual because it takes some funding for that to be done.
Okay.
So you cannot write them off. It's not like the life cannot happen and they cannot proceed.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Madam Moderator, just reminding about the time.
Yes,
we are left with like 3 minutes. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you very much, Josephine. Yeah, it's good to have listened to these wonderful ladies about their well-researched areas. So I would like now, therefore, to open this to the plenary. The audience is free to ask questions. They may write them in the chat box, or they may actually unmute and ask. The panelists are here. They are able to respond to them. So I think it's Grace Rose that can help us with the chat box. So it's open for. Are there some?
Thank you so
much. In the meantime, if I could request everyone just to give us another 5 minutes so we can properly close out, including the final closing, please.
Okay, it's 5 minutes. Okay, that we have. Okay then, no questions, and maybe none at all.
Okay, I can read maybe 2 questions from the chat.
Okay, then they'll respond.
Yeah, because there are very many questions. We will get the responses, and when we're sharing the presentations and the recordings, we'll try to have the responses to the questions shared as well. There's a question asking, how do we address the tendency to see disability inclusion as an area of specialist intervention and not a key element to infuse all ECD or ECCE programs? That's one question.
Thank you.
And a second question, I'll just keep it to 2 questions.
Yes, please.
What opportunities or platforms are currently available to support the training and mentorship of upcoming early childhood health and development specialists in Africa? Yes, back to you.
Okay, so who is ready? Thank you very much, Grace. Who is ready? Of any one of you can take that one. I hope you had them.
I think I can take a stab on the first one, if that's okay. How do we make the subject of inclusion more about communities rather than the specialization? And I think that's something that we are trying to touch on with this IDEC project, with a heavy focus on raising awareness, doing the advocacy, and building on the knowledge and skills of persons in the community, a range of persons. So we're looking at the duty bearers, the district level. We're looking at frontline workers. We're looking at civil servants in the health sector, in the education sector, and more importantly, focusing our time and efforts on the community themselves, the ones who are close by to these children and who are there when we are not. And I think what this has done has really shown us that this is possible. There was a moment where we felt that this is something that really needs only highly specialized people, but then we've learned that there are certain things that caregivers, and when I say caregivers, I'm talking about mothers, fathers, people who are taking care of the child. are able to do because they're there to support the child every day. We are learning. I'm not saying that it is a perfect system. We are learning through this process, and we are also getting feedback from the caregivers that's helping us to improve on what we're learning and doing. So to me, I see that this is the way to go, because before this, we had we had the issue of working in the darkness. We don't know where the children are. We don't know what the issues are. We're worried about getting specialized support to them. There's a smaller fraction of children who do need this specialized support, and not to discount them. We do need to be able to make sure that they get supported, but we will be missing out also on the hundreds and thousands there that can also be supported with through the communities that they live and work with. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Daphne. The second question, somebody would like. Was it not clear?
I think the second question was clear, but I struggled to find an answer because it's talking so continent-wide. I think there are opportunities within countries, with organizations. There are not many, but I don't. Sorry, not that I'm answering it. I'm just trying to explain why I felt I can't take it, and maybe there's somebody who's willing to jump in.
Okay, Dr. Vivian, are you able to take on that? No?
No, I think I'll pass it on. It's about community-based, the one on community-based rehabilitation.
Yeah, and I think it kind of, you don't like to, okay, what about Lina? I think that's your cup of tea. No? Okay, it will be perhaps, I think we don't have time anymore. We've definitely come to 1:30 and beyond, and we need to be moving on to the next question. I'd like to still request each one of you, the panelists, to just say some more, just have like a parting word before we head on to the next, for the way forward. So can we start again? This time we start with Lina. Lina, please, something that you would like to leave the audience and everybody with.
Hello, yes, I believe Lina has stepped out at this time.
Okay, so can we have something to say as we conclude this? Okay, I think I can do this then. I would like to thank every one of you, the panelists, for this wonderful session. I think it has added more knowledge to what we've been with before. I think as we part, as we conclude the panel discussion, what stands out is, yes, we have our very good innovative ways, the models that we have come up with. We are able to screen children, we are able to identify, and we have galvanized the health sector, the education sector, and the families. We are working with them. And of course, children with disabilities may range from 0 to so many years, because they usually have the delayed developmental milestones. But we are doing good work. What we have, I think, to take away from here is remembering the old community-based rehabilitation. Always the urge was that we are transferring knowledge and skills to the communities. That it's not just about the specialist knowledge that we are going to be depending on, because it comes to us expensively, but that we can transfer that knowledge in however simple terms that we are able to, and the communities will define their destiny and future. So I would like at this point to, the privilege and honor to invite a very important person. This next session is also our way forward. I would like to invite Professor Seth Opong, and he'll be able to give us the way forward. Dr. Seth Opong is an associate professor at the Department of Psychology, University of Botswana, Gaborone, Botswana. He's also a research associate at the Department of Psychology, University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg, South Africa, and is a member of the Knowledge Generation Working Group of AU and CESA IECD cluster. He is viewed by many as a thinker and a theoretician in psychology in Africa. His research interests include cultural, historical, philosophical, and theoretical domains of psychology and African psychology, as well as decolonizing early childhood development in Africa. In collaboration with some IECD practitioners and researchers, he has co-authored a practical resource on how to enhance cultural relevance of early childhood development interventions in Africa. Currently, he is working with AFCAN to undertake the KICS Early Learning Knowledge Synthesis Scoping Study on the projects financed by Global Partnership for Education and the International Development Research Center, IDRC. So over to you, Professor Seth Opong.
Thank you, Lee. And thank you all for staying with us for this time. I would be snappy about what I have to do. So we have listened to a lot of speakers, starting from the parent or the caregiver, sharing her lived experiences as a caregiver of a child with disability, highlighting the need for increased access to special education services, and also the need for financial and other material support, as well as the family providing the important support that the child and then the caregiver requires for the optimal development of that child. Again, we heard about the landscape analysis and then the work that has been done to develop the CMCD, which is very important. And again, the panel discussion talked about the interventions that have, or highlighted some of the interventions being done on the continent to provide quality and adequate care to children, our children with disability. In fact, they highlighted the need for early identification through assessment and also further involvement in all of this. I would want to add that in all of this, we should also be using the strength-based approach where we look at the asset, the cultural asset in the communities that could be integrated into the interventions to make them more sustainable. For instance, where there is limited further involvement, we should be concerned about how to get the fathers involved. There's so much the government can do. There's so much international organizations can do. There's so much NGOs can do to provide the needed support for our children with disability. So for instance, because the daily expenses of taking care of a child with disability falls on the parents, whether we like that or not, and that it will require extra income to do that. Though I did not hear from our interventionists whether or not there is any component of income generating activities in some of these interventions, which will be very important, that will empower the family to be able to take care of their children when the intervention runs dry of funds or the NGO decides to move to other communities. And in that case, how do we involve fathers in some of those income generating activities? Because in the African context, we do know that there are issues when it comes to income income generation and support, financial support. And many of these families may have the interesting issue of the father providing the financial support. I would say again that all interventions, or every intervention, almost always disrupts the normal way of life within the community. So the question that I would like us to address is, how do we make the skills and the changes that we are implementing fit into the natural order of things in the community, so that when the intervention runs dry of funds and the organizations leave the communities, these communities or the caregivers and their families will be able to continue to use the skills because they fit into the natural order of things in their community. And one of the things that we should also be aware of is that when things run or things become unnatural to the ways of life in the community, they are only interested, or most often, people become interested in the material and the financial support they would receive from the interventions while it's active in those communities. So we should think of how to fit these changes into the natural order of things in the community so that our interventions become more sustainable. Again, we should be concerned about the physical design of the homes of the children and the family dynamics as we think about the disruptions that we cause with our interventions and how our interventions will become institutionalized in the way of life of the communities. So on this note, I would say a very big thank you to all the panelists and the caregiver, Mama Melody, for sharing these lived experiences with us. And I think Mr. Masheleni is not around with us, so I would be the last person to speak. And so on this note, I would say thank you to everyone. Let's carry the lessons that we have learned from this webinar into our institutions, into our homes, and provide, even if all that we can do is awareness creation in the community, it will help with the progress of activities as far as providing adequate and quality care to children with disability. Again, as AU prepares for the year of education in 2024, let this be the first note of that preparation, and let's continue to engage our communities. And here by communities, I mean any geographical or social group that you belong to, on the issues of providing quality and adequate care to our children with disability. And again, as we continue to mainstream early childhood care into our education sector plans, let also be mindful that we include the care of children with disability, because oftentimes it may be glossed over because of our zeal to just have a chapter on ECD in our education sector plans. Thank you all for being part of this webinar. It's my privilege to end this webinar and declare it a close. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. you.